If you've been around here for a while, you know that I've been trying to run sub 3 for the last few years. Alan and I have been using the advanced marathon plans since we read the book a few years ago and had Pete Fitzinger and Scott Douglas on the podcast the first time, because we did have a repeat of those two on the podcast when they released another edition of the same book. I'm pretty sure that one of my biggest limiting factors is fueling. I have a hard time getting to those 60 plus grams per hour of carbohydrates. And I've kept my nutrition goals pretty low because of that. Just because I just find, well, I find it hard to tolerate, especially towards the end. So, anyway, a while back we received a listener email, and the listener actually suggested that I should be aiming for 80 grams per hour, which sounds like a good goal in order to succeed in training and on race day. But maybe it's also time to look at the training plan that I've been using. I've been committed to advanced marathoning because the medium long runs midweek make me feel superhuman. I think Alan shares that with me. And the workouts are scary enough that I believe that if I succeed most of them, I have a good chance of running a good race. The overall mileage is also pretty high, which just gives me excuses to be out running a lot when the weather is hot, and that's just the way I like it. Um, but today's book also has some high mileage plans, and maybe going back to an 18-week plan is also worth a try because I've been working off 12 weeks because I've been getting fried after 18. So maybe I'll get some feedback on that. Hi, and welcome to the Running Book Reviews podcast, where we review books written for runners, about runners, and by runners to help you decide if you would like to read the book for yourself. We also hope that listening to us chat about running can help keep you motivated about your own running, or maybe inspire you to try something new. My name is Liz, and with my co-host Alan, we're going to talk with author John Davis, who is also a PhD on the subject, about his book, Marathon Excellence for Everyone.
Oh, before I continue, John's a PhD.
Mm-hmm. And I know, I'm the Wallowitz of the group again.
I didn't want an opportunity to go by without calling you out as the Wallowitz of the group.
I figured you would. I would expect nothing less of you.
I love it. Back to the podcast. Marathon Excellence for Everyone by John Davis. I mean, this is basically a Bible about marathon running, training, and racing. It has 50 chapters. Don't panic, they're quite small, although it is a big book, divided into 8 sections, not counting the quite extensive appendix. I'll just run you through the names of the sections quickly to give you a flavor of what you're in for today. 1, first steps, then the phases of marathon training, training plans, quite an extensive dip into training plans, race day and beyond, the science of marathon performance, the science of fueling, overcoming illness, injury, and other setbacks, and advanced training techniques, just when you thought you had everything. Let me tell you a little bit about John Davis, or John J. Davis, as his book tells us. John is a scientist, writer, and coach. His work uses modern machine learning and biostatistics to understand biomechanics, physiology, and human health. So we're at the pointy end of marathon understanding, I think, at this point. Recently, he's focused on using these same sort of tools to tackle problems in AI alignment and AI interpretability. His site, johndavis.io, is where he puts his technical stuff, write-ups and explanations on topics like AI, machine learning, and biomechanics. But probably more for the listeners, he can be found at www.runningwritings.com, where I was actually browsing yesterday and saw a very excellent lecture on some of the contents of the book. And it's a good way, if you want to feed yourself, get over there and check some of that out. So, welcome to the podcast, John, after that lengthy intro.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm glad to be here. When I saw the title of the podcast, I was like, this is the one I got to get on. I wrote a running book. I
Absolutely.
got to get on this podcast.
Yeah, and I probably
Yes.
probably should preface by just thanking you for the personalized notes that you sent us with the books. So we get books provided by publishers or authors, um, but it's rare that we get insightful, personalized comments and directions and little sections of the book tagged up for us.
Hmm.
And we noticed that we were given different advice as well. So
And
very,
probably very
very specific.
appropriate. Yeah.
Well, I did my best.
We should start like we normally start. What made you decide to write this book, and what are you trying to achieve with the book, and who is the book for?
Well, I was finishing up getting my PhD in human performance in 2023. And this idea had been bouncing around in my head for a long time because I've been coaching throughout grad school, before grad school, and had a lot of marathoners who had come to me and had been doing pretty normal traditional training, had, kind of mediocre success with it, and then using some of these more, we'll call them modern marathon training approaches, we were able to get much better results. And I was like, I'm like, my time is finite. I can't coach more than, I don't know, 20 people at a time. I got to get this in a something for like the person out there who's like, I want to do this like modern marathon training. I want to know the science behind it. I want to know how to train. I want to know how to do all the other stuff with the marathon too, right? The race day plan, fueling, like recovery, all that. Because the marathon's a really interesting, complicated event where like you're on the 5K, you're on a 10K, it's like whatever, do it on the weekends, like no problem. But marathon, you need to plan for the event as well as a training plan for before the event. So, yeah, I finished grad school and was like, all right, this is what I'm going to do for the next few years.
I always think marathon's a bit like an investment portfolio. You're like you're committing yourself for a decent amount of time. Months and months to get results. It's a bit like investing your money. You've got to like keep putting it in there and wait and be patient, and you only get so many shots at it. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, you need a
Exactly.
diversified portfolio because if you're like, I'm just gonna not worry about the fueling and I'm just gonna not worry about the race morning logistics, like you might be in for a rough day.
Hmm. So before we get into all of that, which I definitely have questions there, how did you start running?
I came up through kind of the classic pipeline. My parents signed me up for cross country in middle school to keep me out of trouble, and I ran high school track and cross country, ran in college, and then went to the roads after that. And kind of halfway through college, I got the like the running, coaching, and science bug, and started reading
Okay.
old books and like scientific papers, and like really started coaching within a few months of finishing college.
When let's just start general, when people come to you for coaching. So you said that like they come doing like sort of the traditional marathon training. What does that usually look like and how does it contrast with what you have them transition to?
Do you take caffeine when you run? Lots of people do because it's in gels and stuff. And caffeine's legal and it's been proven to work. There's actual science that shows that it improves your endurance running performance.
And there's anecdotal data from when you have your coffee in the morning and you go for a workout versus when you forgot to have your coffee or you didn't have time and you went for a workout and it was terrible.
And the trouble with coffee is there's a lot of liquid just to get your caffeine dose.
Yeah, so then you have to stop for the bathroom mid-workout. Very impractical. Which is where caffeine bullet comes in.
What's caffeine bullet, Liz?
It's a caffeine supplement. It's wrapped up like in a candy. So, and it tastes like candy. And you can get 100 milligrams or 85 milligrams, which is about a cup of coffee, but without the liquid.
So we've tried the mint flavor and the chocolate orange flavor, and they're both pretty yummy.
If you want to try them for yourself, we do have a 20% off discount code. So go to the link in the show notes and you can check out what Caffeine Bullet is. and get your 20% discount.
Pretty generous.
It is pretty generous.
And we'll get a small benefit, so you're helping out the
Speaking of which, back to the podcast.
Yeah, the prototypical example is somebody who's like, they run some mileage, do some 20-mile easy runs. They maybe do like a midweek threshold workout and some short speed workouts or like short tempo run or whatever. And then
Yeah,
they
that
kind of
sounds pretty accurate. Yeah,
run the
that's
marathon. I kind of hope for the best. And then what I have them do is first, like we look at what they've been doing, and like to the extent that it's working, we keep the things that seem to be working for them. So if someone's like, "Oh, I do this like 5 by mile workout every 2 weeks," or what it seems like I get really fit from it, like we don't just scrap that, but we try to prepare number one marathon specific workouts. So like we try to build the actual race from the ground up that they want to run. So if they're trying to run 3 hours, for example, it's 6:52 per mile, or four. You probably know it better than I do. It's a
4:15. Yeah, per
4:15 per K.
kilometer. Yeah.
And
we know it well.
Yeah.
okay,
Too
so we
well.
try to start like building up like how long can we run at that speed? And then can we support that with long, fast runs about 5-10% slower than that? Those are usually the things that people are missing. Because that's what I'm looking for is like, what's this person missing here in terms of like, okay, we got marathon pace and then we've got the supportive speeds around it and the specific speeds that are very close to it. So usually what people are missing is long, fast runs at speeds pretty close to marathon pace, high volume marathon specific workouts, either continuous runs at marathon pace or something like 2K at marathon pace, 1K float, only 10% slower, going back and forth between those. And then another thing that often people are not doing is long repeats at maybe like 10K pace, so like 108, 110% of marathon pace. Nowadays, with like threshold stuff being more popular, I do see people who are more comfortable with longer, like threshold half marathon pace kind of stuff. Kind of
Hmm.
back in the day, about 10 years ago, that was a little less the case. But usually, yeah, it's the marathon specific stuff, long fast runs, and for a lot of people, those like long repeat 2,000, 3,000 meter repeats at call it like 8K, 10K pace.
Okay.
Liz
So,
loves threshold running. It's one of her
oh my
favorites.
God, it's my arch nemesis. Absolutely. Yeah. Like it destroys me every time.
We were doing a
Advanced
bit last
marathoning.
night, in fact, weren't we?
Yeah. Advanced marathoning has us do up to, so they kind of they try and work you up to it. So they start with 6K, which is fine. 6K is good. I can handle 6K. Then 8, it's a little more challenging, but usually like if I really grind it out, like I can get it done. But then when it hits 10 and 11, oh, yeah, those like I almost always fail. Especially the 11K one, I think I have never succeeded
Hmm.
ever. So yeah, so I don't know what it is. It's like I get over a certain amount, like I can't do it. Um, it's just too long, too hard. But I'm actually kind of curious because I'm going to contrast this with Advanced Marathon just because I've been following that plan for, I don't know, maybe the last like what, 5 marathons or something like that. And they have these medium long runs. And so the medium long run is not supposed to be a jog. It should be a little faster than a jog, but it's definitely not like you mentioned. You mentioned close to marathon pace, and I wouldn't say it's close to marathon pace. It would be like, let's say that I'm aiming for
It's about
well,
20% off or something like that, is it?
the 3 hour marathon. Yeah, I think it's supposed to be 20% according to the book. But I remember like 4:30 per kilometer, which is about a 3:10 marathon. I was doing those runs at 5 minute per K, so it's like 30 seconds per K slower. So what, how, how would, let's say, running a little closer be better? And also, how long would I have to run at that pace? Like because you mentioned it's a long run. So I'm thinking, 30 kilometers, 35 kilometers, and that sounds kind of scary. So
Yeah, well, what I always tell people is like, okay, we can let's think about where we want to get to, and like let's say marathon pace was 4:15 per K. Ideal situation would be at the end of training, maybe say like 3 weeks out from the marathon, maybe four, you'd be able to do 30 to 32K at 428. That's 95% of 415. But we don't start there. We don't do that tomorrow, right? First,
Okay.
we build up. We
Phew,
start both
because
both at a slower speed. So, for example, 90% of 415 is 441 per K, which that's like moving pretty good, but it's not like crazy, crazy fast. And we don't you don't even start with like 30, 32K at that. You start with like 16K, 18K, and then a little bit more, a little bit, do that workout every 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 2K more, 3K more, something like that. And then once you can do maybe 25K or 24K at that speed, what we can do, and something that I use in the plans in the book is, okay, now let's take 24K, and instead of doing it all at 90%, let's break it into four 6K chunks. We'll do 90, 92, 94, 96% for each of those chunks. So you're really gradually building up this capability. And then as the run gets longer and it gets faster, you take more recovery afterwards. So for those biggest sessions, like 28, 30, maybe 32K, getting down to as fast as 428 per K, you don't just like take an easy day and then like do a hard workout 48 hours later or whatever. It's like, okay, you do that really big workout and then day off, very easy day, another very easy day, light workout, two more easy days, then another big marathon specific session. So it's like I actually like the medium long run as sort of a like a precursor or like a next step, like the long fast run as the next step from that. This is
Mhm.
kind of like if you've been doing you've been doing like 80, 85% of marathon pace. That'd be like 506 to 453 for 3 hour marathon pace. Once
Mhm.
you build those up and you're pretty comfortable, then question is like, okay, like what's for this next training cycle or for this next month of training, what's the new thing I'm going to do? And if you've done a zillion training cycles where you build up to like 30K at 5 minutes per K, you need something new. And like probably that's not going to be 40K, right? Like that's one direction you could go. But I always encourage people, let's make the training more marathon specific. And by specific, I mean speeds that are closer to marathon pace. So I actually do that with workouts at both ends. Sometimes I see people where like they do really a lot of maybe they've read Daniels and they really do a lot of like view to max stuff, which is that's like
Mhm.
3K pace basically. It's 3K, 5K race pace. And I try to get them to take those workouts and actually make them higher volume and slower to get the workout closer to the marathon specific speeds. Same thing with like the medium long run. It's like, okay, great foundation. Let's take that and make it more marathon specific. And generally, I find that it's easier to go fast and short and then try to make it longer versus
Mhm.
like, okay, I'm already up to 32K at like 80% of marathon pace. And now I'm going to try to do it at like the whole thing at 85 and then the whole thing at 90 and then the whole thing at 95. That's just a
Okay.
pretty big ask.
I can see that. Yeah. I mean, because yeah, in general, so what happens is, like let's say a track workout, which is, 5K pace or something like that. I have usually no problem hitting those paces. But then I get longer and longer and like I just have such a hard time like threshold is what because threshold, I don't know what it's supposed to be. Maybe it's supposed to be about 15K to half marathon pace, something like that. It depends whose definition you're following, but I mean, yeah, like those 10Ks at threshold, yeah, it's like I said, I fail every time.
It's
But
interesting that you're using the term threshold, and I use the term threshold, but that's not the term that you use in the book, John. You use the term. Sorry to
Probably
cut you off.
steady state
that's okay.
max
SS max,
is
steady state max.
Hmm.
yeah.
So
And the
can you
reason
explain to us and our listeners
the reason
the
I do that
difference?
is number one, that's like the technical term. But if you say threshold to a physiologist, or you say lactate threshold to a physiologist without any additional specification, they're actually not thinking about that like 15K half marathon pace. They're thinking about like 10% slower, 15% slower than marathon pace. They're thinking LT1, the first lactate
Okay.
threshold. And then there's also like what when you say threshold, I know you're talking about LT2, second lactate
Yes.
threshold. But and this is in this is scientific chapters in the book. LT2 is just a technique for trying to estimate your steady state max. So the analogy I use is it's like the steady state max is like your core temperature, and then LT2 is like one of those like oral thermometers you stick under your tongue. But then there's other techniques too. There's like the like infrared forehead gun. There's the little like pill you can take, and it gives you a more accurate estimate. So there are other, if you've heard of critical speed, for example, or if you've heard the term
Yes.
maximal lactate steady state, those are actually different estimates that try to get at the same thing. They're all trying to estimate steady state max. So when people think like, oh, critical speed, that's different from maximal lactate steady state, that's different from LT2, they have different definitions, but they're trying to measure the same thing in the same way that like you get the forehead gun and you check your forehead temperature before getting on a international flight or something, versus
Mhm.
like you take the temperature capsule, you get a different number, but they're both trying to estimate core temperature. So I've tried to talk to people about like, okay, the the thing we're talking about, the real physiological phenomenon, is this maximal steady state. And that's what it's supposed to feel like. It's supposed to feel like I'm really like riding this line. Everything's at an equilibrium, but if I just go a little bit faster, then okay, I'm out of equilibrium now, and I'm starting to like get tired much
So
more quickly.
if you were to measure it in
Mhm.
pace, it would be the fastest you could go without triggering the lactate upturn,
Oh,
the
yeah, the
LT2. So
lactate.
it's the pace.
Mhm.
If you were to call it a pace, it would be the pace just before or just underneath your lactate, your uncontrollable lactate cascade.
Where that those lactate levels are going up over time. I think where people get confused is like a standard LT2 test in a lab. You look at lactate across different speeds, and then you have this like curve of it going up. But the thing that that's trying to get at is under the hood, it's trying to estimate what are the speeds where lactate is stable, and also like VO2 and heart rate and all that are stable over time versus starting to crash towards their limiting values.
And I guess this is the sort of holy grail of the three or four, probably four things that you talk about, um, in that if you can find this, make it higher and stay there for longer. That's kind of what it's all about. That's what Sarway is doing. Yeah.
Yeah, and maybe to what Liz was talking about, I like to differentiate what that steady state is versus how long you can stay just below it.
Hmm.
Because a lot of people have that experience where they're like, oh, 6K continuous at this speed, no problem, just crush it. But then like 8K is it's all right, 10K, oh, uh-oh, this is really hard. And then 12K, it's like I can't do that at all.
Yeah.
That's actually the ability to stay right below that for a long time is different than the um, what that steady state is. It's much more common with like middle distance runners, people who are like 1500, 3K. They have this to an even more extreme degree where like they can achieve that steady state, but then when they try to maintain it for a long time, it's like, oh gosh, like
Yeah, but
it's
they only
really
have to
challenging.
maintain it for 2 minutes. We marathon runners
Mhm.
have to maintain it for 3 hours. That's a different game.
Hmm.
Um, uh, but probably before getting into the weeds of that, I'll just roll you back a bit with our listeners. Um, your plans are basically constructed. They're all constructed, and you explain how to construct it yourself if you want to do one for unique for yourself. They're all constructed in three phases: a general phase, what you call a a supportive phase, and a specific marathon specific phase, which you touched on earlier. So maybe you could just explain, because it's a key part of your book. What are these three phases of a training program? What are the purposes and characteristics?
And
Yeah,
why do
so
you want the three? Because I think a lot of people, they think that the marathon specific is the most important and they spend 18 weeks at marathon specific.
yeah, so I'll go through the three phases in order. So a general phase, what we want to do is we want to build each of the like individual components we of fitness we need. So like higher VO2 max and higher steady state max and better running economy. Um, and we do that with workouts across a broad range of speeds. So it's actually very similar to what we were talking about earlier, where like we do some stuff at like 5K pace and 10K pace, half marathon pace, slower than marathon pace, do some easy mileage, maybe do some strides or hill sprints, like really broad base of speeds that we're using. And we're building the individual components. So we're doing some fast running, we're doing some long running. We're not going long and fast at the same time at marathon pace. I kind of the analogy is like building a house, where like the general phase, we're like buying the lumber, the plywood, the 2x4s, the drywall, but we are not like building the house yet. We're just buying the material we need. We're buying the raw stuff. Um, and not only are the speeds distributed across a wide spectrum, but also the intensity within the week is pretty like flatly distributed. So in the plans, for example, a lot of the weeks have 3 workouts, but none of them are like really hard workouts. None of them are super big. They're very manageable sessions. And the pattern over time is that we will start to concentrate the intensity into fewer, bigger sessions and push that distribution of paces closer to those speeds that are really close to marathon pace. I almost want to use the word like polarized but I'm not going to, because that has a different particular meaning for some people. The word that the Italian coach Renato Canova uses is modulation. So we go more towards like a bigger stress and then a bigger recovery. So the first step of that progression happens in the marathon supportive phase, where, okay, we try to narrow our focus into 90 to 110% of marathon pace. So that's like the slower, more controlled version of that long fast run I was talking about to you, up to 10K, 8K pace, maybe a touch faster for some people, depending on whether they're more speed or endurance oriented. So then we start doing some long and fast running, but not the longest, the fastest runs. And we take a little bit more recovery after the sessions. We go back to 2 quality sessions per week. And then finally, the marathon specific phase, we squish that distribution of paces we're focusing on into 95 to 105%. So that's like the fastest version of that long fast run. Obviously 100% of marathon pace, that's marathon pace. And then 105% of marathon pace, that's about half marathon pace for most people. And then we have the most extreme version of like really big stress and really big recovery. One of the things in the marathon specific phase that people have a hard time wrapping their head around is that during those last 4-6 weeks of training for that phase, mileage is not super important. I'm much less interested in mileage and much more interested in, let's get a really high quality session in, and then let's really recover afterwards. I think where a lot of people run into trouble is, like you said, they think, okay, the whole 18 weeks or 16 weeks or 12 weeks or however long their build is, it's got to be marathon specific. So they don't, unless they've been doing lots of base training before, they don't start from a foundation of general. They're trying to build the house they're trying to build a 3-story house, but they only have the material for like 1 or 2 stories. So then they run into trouble. And then the other thing, like you might say, like, why do we need periodization at all? Why don't we just do the same training all year round? The reason is those big marathon specific sessions, and then the recovery afterwards, you can only do them for 4, 5, 6, maybe 8 weeks if you're really, really experienced. Before you start, your abilities across that broad range of speeds start to erode. So you're kind of like, the analogy I've used, and this is not like geologically accurate, but it's kind of like you have a cliff that's like jutting out from a mountainside, and like the bigger the base is, the further out that cliff can go before it crumbles and it falls off. So you kind of like go out on a limb, so to speak, a little bit, and then you run the marathon, and then rest, recover, and you return to building up that very broad base again. So it's like buy the materials, start to assemble the individual components, and then finish the house that you're building in each of those 3 phases.
Excellent explanation, but I heard something which in my mind I was wondering whether that was marathon runners blasphemy, where you said, mileage mileage does not really important. We sort of we're taught almost, and we see in books, the thing that correlates best with people's marathon achievements, if you just correlate all the data, is overall mileage. So then your mentality becomes, okay, I've got to do my marathon training at 100K per week, or I've got to do my marathon training, got to kick it up a little bit from what I was doing to 10K more per week. But actually, you're saying that that's relevant to a certain point, but after a while, it's really, can you do those key marathon related workouts and recover
Yeah,
before you would think about, well, how many miles have I done this week? Because that's what we do as a club. We get together on the Strava table on on Sunday on Sunday on
After
Sunday
after the
in
easy run.
after the easy run on Sunday. The week is finished, and we have a look at the table and go, "Oh yeah, I'm up there. I've got I've got I've banked another week with 100K in it." But
yeah.
we're committing a bit of an error, it would seem.
Yeah, I mean the thing with mileage is like I'm not obviously there's plans for like up to 160 plus K a week in the book. Like I'm not
Hmm.
against mileage. The question you got to ask yourself is what is the mileage for? Is it for building the ability to do those big long workouts? If it is, and I think it is, then the once you become able to do the workouts, then you got to do the workout and then recover afterwards. So like say you get to the point where you can do one of those big long fast runs, but then you do that run and then you're like, "Oh, I'm only at 94K for this week." And even if the plan says take a rest day tomorrow and really recover, and you're like, "Oh no, I got to get those 6K in to get to 100." I think that's a mistake. Or if you do take a day off and then you get out on Monday and you're like, oh well, I gotta get my 14 or 15K run in, even though my legs are trash and I feel terrible. In the marathon specific phase, I think that's a mistake because you want to be really gradually building yourself back up and really absorbing the benefits of those big workouts. Because if someone is like, hey, I did like this. I did well, 25K continuous at marathon pace. And then I did 30, then I took several easy days and then I did 32K continuous at 95% of marathon pace. I'm like, gosh, you're ready to go. Like, this is, just like get out there and run the race. And like, I almost don't care what their mileage is because in that moment, because they clearly their fitness is highly marathon specific. So the question you have to ask is like, how do I get there? And mileage is a big part of getting there because a 32K run at a decent clip, like you need to have some base of volume to be able to do that. But mileage is just one of the tools, and it's the mileage is the base that allows you to do the specific work. It's not like the singular thing you should always be optimizing for.
So does that mean that you might actually be running more mileage in the marathon supportive phase instead of the specific phase? Like, because
Yes,
you won't be doing those giant workouts because those are saved for the marathon specific phase.
Yes, yeah, very often, and I think in almost all the plans in the book, mileage peaks in the marathon supportive phase, not in the marathon specific phase. I think that's another one of the ways where people kind of get themselves in trouble, is like they're growing their mileage and they're growing the volume intensity of their workouts all at the same time, and so they have the biggest, hardest workouts in the week with the biggest mileage, and it just like is just too much for them.
Hmm. That's interesting. Okay, I think that I'm not like I would need to go and really look at the plans, but like I think normally plans in terms of mileage, they tend to peak
Peak just
in
before
those
you taper,
last few.
and
Yeah,
then have a
because
3 week taper.
you're always feeling kind of stale in that last like 6 weeks before the marathon. So I think that at least the advanced marathoning ones, they probably peak later, but that makes sense. So I guess that's just one way that this these plans might be a little bit different. Um, also, you talk about double runs. So I actually like double runs a lot because I've always found like I had my previous coach used to give us double runs, and I used to find that it was a lot easier to recover from, let's say, a 45-minute and because we used to train in minutes, so 45 minutes and 75-minute runs rather than one big 2-hour run. So when do you usually start incorporating doubles, like in terms of just for runners that maybe have never done that before? Like, would you first have them max out their number of days per week, or does it not matter?
Yeah, I think I tend to be more enthusiastic about doubles than the average coach, particularly when I'm thinking about long-term plans for someone where if I'm like, okay, you're only going to be running, I don't know, say 90, 95K this build, but next time around, we want it to be 105, and then we want it to be 115, and then maybe 120, 125. And if I'm thinking ahead, I'm like, okay, what do they need to be ready to do to run 125K a week? I'm thinking like, three, four doubles probably. And of yeah, maybe it's like 8K and 14K, something like that. It's like kind of a normal easy day for them at that volume. So I'm walking that backwards, like cycle by cycle, year by year to now. And I'm like, okay, well, uh, I actually think it's valuable this training cycle for that person, maybe twice a week to get out and do 5 or 6K, very easy, in the mornings. Now, in practice, like it depends a lot on like people's work schedule and whatever. Some
Hmm.
people, if they're like, I'm so busy, like I'm already like really gassed for sleep. I usually I won't. I'll just have them do singles and increase their volume more that way. But I tend to introduce doubles earlier, both for that reason I just explained, and then for the one that you mentioned, where if you just think about it, like in the abstract, assuming like maximum recovery and rest and all that, what's harder on your body, 16K continuous or 8K in the morning, 8K in the evening, both the same speed? Probably it's the morning and the evening split. And so if I'm thinking, getting back to the mileage thing, like, okay, what's the lowest stress way to get the volume we need in the week? It's generally going to be splitting runs into 2 sessions. And then there's just the pragmatic argument that like when you look at the best marathoners in the world, like, well, they're doing like 12, 13 training sessions a week. So like clearly it's there's something there. Um, but yeah, like I said, if someone is super busy or whatever, I'm not like a super dogmatic, like everybody needs to be doubling at such and such volume. But I do introduce them earlier, because to a large extent of that recovery aspect. I think again, one of the mistakes people I see people make is like they get that 30K run in on Saturday, and then Sunday they're doing 20K or 25K. They're just like really stacking all these like long single runs to hit their volume when maybe it would have been better if they just added some super easy doubles during the week.
And what would the shortest double be that you would, let's say, start someone at?
If I'm thinking like long term, I mean, I used to coach high school. I still,
Okay.
advise a couple of high schoolers. So I'm all very often thinking like 3, 4 years down the line. I'll have people do like 20 minutes, super easy. Like so
Okay.
like less than 5K. Again, I know that's also kind of like controversial. There's various numbers floating around of like 6K or 8K or 30 minutes or whatever for like
Yeah,
minimum
my
run
coach back in
duration.
the day, I think he said like none of the runs should be less than 30 minutes because he said something about I think like he read something about growth hormone secretion or something, and I think it took like I don't know. I don't remember exactly. All I did was, coach said it, so I did it kind of things.
Uh-huh.
And but that number always stuck with me. I'm like, I coach some athletes and I will never have them do less than 30 minutes. If I'm gonna have them do less than 30 minutes, I'm just gonna have them do like one single run. So
I,
yeah.
I
Yeah,
do the I do the old guys double, which is 60-minute run, 20-minute dog walk. Probably not quite as
yeah.
effective, but there you go.
Yeah, I don't usually like if someone is sort of like mature in their like training, like we've reached the volume that we're probably going to progress to. Usually, yeah, 30 minutes or like 6K is probably the shortest I'll do, but I'm not at all hesitant to if the goal is to get to a point where we can do 40 minutes and 80 minutes a couple of years from now. I'm fine with if this year we a couple days a week we do like 20 and 50, something like that.
So you're seeding the habit basically at that point.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay,
One,
more
one
than
of the things
anything.
that I found great about your book, John, was the amount of different types of running that there is in your programs. I think it's one of the things that you mentioned early on in the book.
Yeah, I
But
think in the
that's
second chapter.
that's kind of appealing because basically, if you're a marathon runner, you can do a lot of running, and any way you look at it, whatever level you're at, it's a lot for whatever your level is. So I was particularly interested in the sort of variation in the runs. I think part of that is keeps you mentally fresh. You don't feel like it's a grind so much. It's changing up. Something that caught my eye in particular was the long run with alternating kilometers. Liz touched on it earlier. We've done training programs that have your big marathon pace blocks in them, and you just go and go and go. And we've done a few of them where we've just failed, and we've just gone, okay, let's stop. This is not going to happen. Let's dial it right back and just jog it home. And so it catches my eye as different ways of trying to do this. So in some of the programs, you've got these long runs. I guess it's more than 20K with alternating kilometers where either you go to marathon pace and then you drop off, or you go above marathon pace and then you drop below marathon pace. But at each K, you're changing up the speed. How difficult is that to do? And I guess with GPS watches, not so difficult to monitor. But what's the idea behind that?
Yeah, so the alternating kilometer session is a classic workout that comes from kind of like the Italian lineage, like Gilindo Borden and like Renato Canova and all them. And then now you see a lot of the like, top Kenyan Ethiopians doing it. And the idea is it's kind of trying to solve the problem we were talking about earlier with the like, okay, well, I can't do 10, if I once I try to do 12K at this fast speed uninterrupted, like it's just so hard. Clearly, if you're going to do 16K, that would be just like crazy, it's crazy, crazy hard. So the solution is like, okay, what if we do like 1K at call it half marathon pace, 105% of marathon pace. But then instead of just like walking for a minute like you would in an interval workout, or instead of just trying to continue at that same pace, what if we drop it back 10, 15% and kind of like float at still a pretty fast speed? So if you're thinking about like how fast is, 10, 15% slower than that 105, it's still about that kind of long fast run, 90-ish% of marathon pace. So you're still moving pretty good. And there's some technical physiological reasons for why that's beneficial. Essentially, it's like creating a situation where your body is strongly induced to shuttle and oxidize lactate. So you're at a steady state, and you are incentivizing your muscle fibers to take that high ambient level of lactate that we were talking about earlier, and then pull it into muscle fibers and then burn it using oxygen. So you're aerobically burning lactate. That's kind of the scientific explanation. But the more practical explanation is like, okay, so 15K continuous at half marathon pace, that's totally off the table. What if we start with, and the progression I use for
Absolutely off the table.
the progression I start with
Not
in the book is
happening.
like, okay, let's build up to like 8 by 1K at that speed and take a minute, minute and a half, just like walk recovery. Or maybe we do like 7 by 1200. So we're just going a little bit further and still taking a walk recovery. And then we'll say, okay, instead of taking a minute and a half walk after 1200 meters, we're going to do 400 meters continuous floating. And then we're going to go again. And then, so 1200, 400, 1200, 400. And then you take that session, turn it into 1K on, 1K off. So you get more recovery, but then the volume is up. So maybe you do 8 by 1K on, 1K off, and the off is still, maybe 15%
First.
slower. And then there's a lot of options for progressing it. One that I like to do is actually take the recovery and then make it faster. That's the kind of the more marathon specific way of progressing it. You do the same thing for like if you're training for a half marathon or a 15K or 16K race. Often what you do is you try to go for it. You make it like 2K, 1K, 2K, 1K, 2K, 1K. And actually that is the pattern that the plans in the book use with workouts at marathon pace, because you can do the exact same thing with, okay, I'm going to do 1K at marathon pace, 1K float at 85% of marathon pace. for some distance, maybe 24 kilometers total. Then the next time you can do, okay, I'm going to go 2K continuous at marathon pace, then 1K float. A couple weeks later, 3K continuous, 1K float. So you're stitching together more and more uninterrupted running. So like by the time you get to some number of 3K, 1K, that's basically like you're running marathon pace continuously for like 75%, three quarters of the workout. And then like on race day, it's kind of like the training wheels come off and just like away you go, and you just like you sort of removed the final floating K, and you just run it straight through.
Hmm. I can see how that works. You know,
So
like it logically makes
yeah,
sense.
yeah, you get the
Mm.
physiological benefit that you've just told us about in terms of developing your lactate shuttle, but you've also got this mental approach, which is you've chunked it. So mentally, you only have to think about, okay, all I have to think about is the next 1K.
Hmm.
This is the fast K. I get some form of a rest afterwards. And you're only projecting yourself, perhaps I would anyway. You're only projecting yourself to the end of this K. And then
Right.
then you're dropping down. Maybe you're not dropping down too much, but you'll feel the benefit of that quite significantly. And then you're resting and getting ready. Hopefully you're resting,
Yeah,
you're
and the
floating, getting
other
ready for the next 1K. And it's only a mental focus for a 1K.
Hmm.
yeah,
So
and
4 to 5 minutes.
the other mental advantage of that workout is you're training yourself to think like I am able to recover like let's say you're doing your float recovery at like 5 minutes per K
Hmm.
for a marathon.
Which is still like pretty
Yeah,
pretty
that's still like a
fast.
pretty
Yeah.
good pace. And
Hmm.
so you're actually training yourself to feel like, okay, at 5 minutes per K, I'm not hanging out. I'm actually recovering. I'm regenerating. And like I can back off and like rebuild my like readiness to go again. When I had people like beta testing the training plans last winter, a couple of them who were doing lower volume plans emailed me after the race and then like, yeah, I was going really good, and then I thought I hit a wall at 32K, and then after a couple K, I looked at my watch and I was still going like 95% of what my original marathon pace was. So instead of like the usual pattern of like, okay, like you kind of hit the wall and then you just
And
like
then
it's
it just crumbles.
5:30 per K,
Hmm.
6 minutes per K. It's like you just back off like
Yeah.
55, 15, 10 seconds per K. And like, you're like, oh, I'm actually fine. I can just like keep motoring at this speed. That's another, I think, big underrated benefit of that
Hmm.
kind of floating recovery workout.
Okay.
In the training program, is there a point where you come up to a test, and if you don't pass that test, you should really be thinking of revising downwards your ambition for race day?
Yeah, a couple of the key. There's no. I'm very hesitant to like put all my eggs in one basket and be like,
Mm,
okay, like this is the
yeah,
workout. You gotta.
yeah.
Both because like there's just variation in how you feel day to day, but also because that people when you do that, people tend to like hammer the workout too hard. Like I want like two or three indicators and not one. So both
Hmm.
because like that reduces some of that variance, but also so that like if we're like, okay, we're doing 25K at marathon pace, this is the golden session. People will just like crush that workout, and then they're
Yeah,
so spent afterwards. It's like you can't really do
that was
anything.
their race, basically.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So I am much more interested in like let's look at like kind of globally, 2 to 3, 4 weeks out. What do those workouts at 100% of marathon pace look like? Obviously, that's the most important. What do the workouts at 95% of marathon pace look like? What are the workouts at 105? So we're like looking at those three key paces right around marathon pace. And one of the things you probably saw in the book is that the workouts have a difficulty rating. So like
Hmm.
a workout might be
Yes.
8 out of 10. So if you hit the pace but it was like a 9.5 out of 10, like you were, puking in the trash can afterwards. That's probably an indication that that was too
It's a
fast.
stretch. Yeah.
And if you have a couple workouts like that, I'm like, okay, well now we need to walk this back. And in the book, there's actually a worked example of like, a mock training plan with like, okay, I averaged this pace and here's how I felt. And in evidence of like, okay, here's when you can increase your estimate, make it faster. Here's when you can dial it back. and here's when it indicates like you're about the right intensity. So yeah, I think like 2 or 3 key sessions as opposed to like the single like trial is the way to go for most people.
Okay. So, I do want to get to talking about like race day, because like I think probably half the book is dedicated to other things, not just the actual training plan for the race. But I just wanted to ask, like, because obviously most people have other things in their life, running is not the only thing. They do move workouts around. Um, what do you suggest in terms of moving workouts around, especially when they get to those big workouts? Like, is there a point where maybe you're better off skipping one of them?
Yeah, this comes up all the time. It's like the single most common question that people have, which is why
Yeah, you have a whole
there's
section on it
yeah,
too.
there's
So,
even like work is like, okay, I sprained my ankle and I had to miss these workouts and like blah blah, or I got sick. Like this is
yeah,
like every almost every training cycle. You can need to travel
of
for
course.
work, like your kid's gonna get sick, like whatever, right? Bad
Yeah.
weather. So yeah, I mean, if it's like a one-off thing, if you just miss one workout, like whatever, just keep going. But what I worry about is like the situations like, oh, I sprained my ankle or I got sick and I missed, 2 or 3 workouts. So if
Hmm.
you were on one of those progressions of like, okay, we're gonna go from like 1K, 1K to 2K, 1K to 3K, 1K, and you miss the 2K, 1K, I don't want you just being like, oh yeah, like let's just jump right ahead to like this like big, huge workout that's like,
Yeah.
3 steps ahead of where I was. Then you have to reshuffle things and figure out like, okay, can I retool this? Can I just like, kind of cancel one of the later weeks of training and like slide everything back? That's kind of the way I think about it is like, okay, you have an 18 week training plan. Last, maybe we can talk about this, but I'm not a big taper guy. Kind of, so I think of only the last like 10, 14 days as like kind of the from the marathon backwards. That generally you leave alone. But if you miss 2 weeks from, I don't know, you miss weeks 6 and 7, what I like to do is, okay, we're not going to touch week 18. That's the race. We're not going to touch week 17. That's the week before the
Week
race. But
before.
we're going to
Hmm.
cancel week 16 and 15 and then slide everything back up. Versus like, nope, I gotta jump 2 weeks ahead and like my mileage is going up like 30 kilometers next week and I'm just gonna dive right into these big hard workouts. That is not a recipe for success. So yeah, there is quite a lot to that the art of adapting the plan. And yeah, because you got to look at like the real situation, right? Like, okay, the reality is I sprained my ankle and I couldn't run for 6 days. Like, we can't just imagine that you ran 100 kilometers in those missing 6 days because you didn't.
Hmm.
So we got to look at like, okay, from now to the race, like, what's the situation and what can we do?
Yeah, I think also there's this idea, like what a lot of people try and do is cram all the workouts into whatever's remaining. And so instead of 2 workouts a week, they'll start doing like 3 workouts a week for the next like 2 weeks or whatever. But then eventually, if it was an injury that kept them out and not just life circumstance, well, they usually get re-injured. So
Yeah, yeah.
probably not the
There's
best
there's a
strategy.
vicious cycle there, and then you run into the problem where like if you're trying to speed run the progression through the workouts, you bump into that issue I mentioned earlier, which is like the bigger the workout, the more recovery you need. So
Hmm.
instead of taking the 4 or 5 days that you should have taken after your big workout, you're trying to cram another hard workout right in between. So sometimes people will even succeed, they'll even get through the training, but they won't get the benefits that they would have gotten had they just like done a less dense training schedule, had they not tried to like squeeze so much out of the week. And
Hmm.
kind of like those bigger workouts, you kind of got to like let the schedule breathe a little bit.
Okay.
One of the things in the training program is that our users or our readers or our adopters are going to face very quickly is trying to work out their paces, targeting their paces. Um, you know, you do talk us through how to choose a plan, what are you trying to achieve, why you should choose certain plans versus other plans, and there are plenty to choose from and different lengths. Um, and then there's paces, and then you have percentages of your pace. Um, usually, I tend to figure, well, what's my 5K pace, and kind of project. project the thing off that, because you can go out and race a 5K and not smack yourself around too much, um, and get a real pace of what you're currently able to do. Is that a good way of doing it?
That is
Oh,
exactly the method that I recommend
okay.
for people in the book. In fact, is that what thing you'll notice is that the general phase uses percentages of 5K pace as the basis for
Yes.
training. The reason for that is A, just what you mentioned. It's very easy to get an estimate of what your 5K pace is. And also, if you've run like a 10K or an 8K or a half marathon, it's much more reliable to predict down to 5K versus just like, oh, I've never done a marathon before. I'm just going to assume I'm in 320 shape or whatever. And then also, like scientifically, there are pretty tight relationships between your 5K pace and like your steady state max pace or your first lactate threshold. So it's you get tighter correspondence to like the kind of physiological responses we're trying to achieve. So the idea is like, okay, we'll start out with something that we know we can estimate or just find out really easily, which is your 5K pace. Train for a while at that. And then once you've done some of these longer workouts, we can look at those and reflect and think, okay, what's realistic for marathon pace here? And there's some guidelines, but a lot of it is interrogating your training. Like, okay, well, I did 15K continuous at 85% of 5K. Was that super comfortable and controlled? Then maybe that can turn into your marathon pace. Did it feel like you were hanging on at the end? Like, well, maybe 83% is better, 82%. And then the other thing that I like to emphasize is like, it's fine to be wrong with your pace estimate because you can just change it. One of the problems that I very often see is people will decide, I want to run under 4 hours. I want to run under 3:30. I want to run under 3 hours or 2:45 or
Those
2:30, whatever.
round numbers.
Hmm.
And they're like, okay, it's 18 weeks out and I am doing workouts at 414.6 per kilometer or whatever the exact goal time is. And then there again, like I said earlier about looking at kind of the real situation of where you're at, um, you may not be, even if you are going to run under 3 or under 2:30 or under 4 or whatever, you likely are not in shape to do that now. Because if you are, like you would just go do it now, right? The whole point is you're trying to get to a
Trying to
point where
get
you
more.
can
Yeah.
do something in the future that you can't do now. That's what training is
Right.
all about.
Yep.
So I'm a big proponent of revising your training estimate every couple weeks. Look at how the workouts have been going. Look at the long-term trajectory. Look at your subjective notes on how did it feel? What was that difficulty? Was it a 7 out of 10, an 8 out of 10, a 9 out of 10? And how does that compare to what you ought to be able to do? Then you can revise, update, and hopefully, over time, okay, 310, 305, 302, 3 hours, 256. You bump that pace estimate down.
And just in terms of like it just because runners now, any runner that starts running will have some kind of device, like a watch, whether it's an Apple Watch or a Garmin watch or whatever watch. And there's a lot of information out there about heart rate training and all this stuff. And I think like as runners, we would love to outsource decision making to a device, but once you get experienced enough, you realize that like there isn't any device out there right now that you can really outsource your decision making to. So my question is, after all of that, what do you think about heart rate? Because I know there's a lot of people will say, okay, well, in perceived effort, well, that must be like there must be heart rate zones for that. And what do you think of outsourcing instead of perceived effort, outsourcing it to some heart rate value?
I'm not a fan of outsourcing perceiving your effort to any kind of objective metric. Like I think there always needs to be a dialogue, but like between how you feel subjectively and some objective metric. I like pace. I understand some people like heart rate. Heart rate is challenging because it is not always reflective of the internal metabolic like costs of your body. If I had a magic wand, I would look at like uh, absolute VO2 when people are running and use that as my indicator if they're like their metabolic rate. The problem with heart rate, and I coach a lot of runners now who are like live in Texas or like live in Arkansas or where it's like really, really hot in the summer.
Hmm.
And they'll be on an easy run. Their heart rate is just like super high. And that's not because their metabolic energy expenditure is super high. It's because their body's using their heart not just to circulate blood for oxygen, but also to circulate blood
To
for
cool.
radiating
Yeah.
heat away. So
Hmm.
there's this phenomenon, people have probably heard of heart rate drift. The more technical term scientifically is there's actually something called slow component of heart rate, where over the course of like 10, 15 minutes, if you're in a lab and you look at somebody's heart rate and somebody's oxygen consumption, the heart rate will be going up, often quite a lot. The oxygen consumption will be staying the same. So, particularly for longer continuous efforts, I find heart rate's not that informative, at least for the kind of athletes in the kind of settings that I work with. I think there's probably some alternative universe where like maybe I coach some sport like cycling, or like I don't know, like swimming, where some other metric is better or more informative, and maybe there's some universe where like I construct this in percentages of heart rate. But you just really got to be careful because there's a lot of traps with heart rate. I mentioned the heat and one. There's also the slow component of heart rate that happens independently of heat. And then there's the fact that people's individual physiological like domains of intensity, where their LT1 is, where their steady state max is, differ as a percentage of their heart rate, the maximum. So then there's the other issue of like you need to know what your max heart rate is, and it can change over time. And very confusingly, as you get into better shape, your maximum heart rate can go down, sometimes up to like 7%. So if it was 200 when you were just getting into things, like by the time
Hmm.
you get really fit, your max heart rate might be down by like 10 or 15 beats a minute. Um,
Which is a huge
so
difference
Yeah.
yes,
because
and
now
if you're
your
like,
dose zones are not the same at all,
right,
Mhm.
right,
right?
right. So in practice, I understand if people are listening to this and they've got their heart rate zones really dialed in, they went to a lab and got tested, blah, blah, blah. That's fine. I
I
understand
can
it. But
guarantee you that is not most people.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Right. They're like, oh, I heard on the internet that I should be running 70% of heart rate max or
Well,
whatever. And they just like,
it's like, and it's also like mostly their heart rate zones are they're getting the ones that like Garmin has calculated for them. And
Yep.
I don't know, I have a beef these days with Garmin calculations because I ran a 10K like a couple months ago. And my 10K was, I don't know, 40 minutes or 41 minutes. And I look at my watch and my predicted 10K time is like 45 minutes. And so this is the story that I tell all of the people that I coach. I'm like, you know what? Like, don't trust your Garmin's garbage data. And I've since even turned off the optical sensor to conserve battery power because I'm like,
hmm.
I'd rather just have more battery power because at this point, it's not really giving me anything useful. So,
Yeah, and sometimes people also psych themselves out by like looking at like they get 3 or 4K into the marathon, they look at their watch and they're like, "Oh gosh, like I'm at 155 and usually I'm at 152 at this pace." And like, "Oh no, I feel terrible." And like they start like you said, they start outsourcing how they feel to the number on the device instead of just perceiving how they feel. And then at the
mhm.
end of the day, look, like you don't get a medal for like running in the correct heart rate zone the whole time in your marathon. Like you get medals for how fast you run. And so this is another aspect of like progression over time in training from general to specific is like in general phase and to some extent in marathon supportive phase, we want to run the right effort and kind of let the pace be whatever it's going to be. So if it's really hot or really windy or you're just really tired and whatever, and you're supposed to be running, I don't know, 4 minutes per K, and you run the 4 minute per K effort and it ends up being like 405 or 407, that's fine. But in the most marathon specific workouts, the big sessions, if you're trying to run 415 per K, like you need to be able to hit that because that's what you need to be able to do in the marathon. So you want to be fresh going into the session, you want to be well fueled, you want to be wearing your super shoes. And if you're like, oh, I feel terrible today, like I don't know what's going on, you should just stop the workout and then take a few easy days and then do it again later, as opposed to just running by effort the whole time. Because at the end of the day, right, like you want to run 3 hours, you got to run 415 per K. You want to run 330, you got to run 5 minutes per K or whatever, right? It's the eventual goal is to not run a heart rate, but to run a speed.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I guess, yeah, my previous coach used to always say, and you need experience at that speed. in order to run it in a race. So um, I like speed.
Well, you've got to run the pace. Yeah, basically, you're not going to get measured for finishing the marathon with the right heart rate. You're not going to get a Boston qualifier based upon maintaining your heart rate at a certain level or whatever. It's true. Um, you need to, in order to optimize your results, you're going to have a strong mental plan for race day as well. How important is that, and what are some tips you can give our listeners?
And
Yeah,
also,
well,
also what like just try and sell it to people because I think that this is very much overlooked.
yeah, I mean the marathon's a long race, right? Like even if you're Sebastian Sawe, you're out there for 2 hours, right? And so that's a long time to be in your own head. And so I think it's much more tractable to, okay, let's take the marathon, let's break it into pieces. And then kind of like you were saying with the 1K workout, you don't when you're on kilometer 8, you don't need to think about like, oh my gosh, I have 36 kilometers to go. Like you just think, okay, get the 10K and, and I've got this like this kind of pace plan and this like mental approach. I'm just trying to be like relaxed smooth here and just get to 10K feeling pretty good. And then 10 to 20K, you have another like, another kind of like mental mantra and pace goal for that. Then 20 to 30K or however you want to break it up. Usually I like breaking it into kind of like the opening miles, the middle 20-ish K of the race, and then kind of the big push when things get difficult, and then the last 1 or 2K. Um, and because you kind of need to be in a different mental state. If your attitude at 10K is like I'm just gonna grind this out, that's not so great. Whereas if your attitude at like 35K is like I'm just trying to be smooth and efficient and relaxed here, like that also may not work because it's good. 35K in the
It's
race is gonna be
grinded out
hard.
time.
Yeah, it's grinded.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
it's grinded out time.
It's always going to be hard at 35K.
So you want to, I like thinking about your mental energy as kind of like a reserve, sort of similar to your glycogen, where, your carbs, where it's like, okay, we want to like kind of plan out how we're going to spend our mental energy here. Make sure we go into the race like kind of well fueled up and like use our training to build up that ability to run um, long and fast and concentrate for a long time. One of the things, this is maybe also a controversial thing I recommend is for some of those long runs, I recommend doing them alone and without any music, because it helps you build that mentality of like an ability of like I'm focusing for an hour and a half, 2 hours, 2.5 hours, which is not like that's not something you can just get out and do if you've never run more than 15K in your life, and you go out and you try to run for a long time especially if it's like I'm trying to hit a
At a
specific speed
challenging
here,
pace.
it is really like mentally you will find that like very challenging, and that's an ability you need to build up. So yeah, I when I say a race plan, I both mean kind of the practical aspects of like pacing and fueling, but I also mean like what's my mentality and how what's my kind of mental approach gonna look like for how this race unfolds over the whole 42K.
Okay. And also, so you have a chapter just about that whole pacing situation. And I think a lot of runners in the marathon, they like to bank time, thinking that they're going to need it at the end. N Not that that's untrue. They might need it at the end, but you actually seem to go out and not by a big difference, but the first half is actually just a touch slower than the second half. And by a touch, I mean like, I think it was the first, you build up to the right pace over, I don't know, maybe the first 6 kilometers or 8 kilometers or something. But it like, we're not talking a difference of, like a minute per K or anything. We're just talking like a few seconds, but it means that you're a little bit slower in the first half because you've spent like a third of it running slower. And this, I think, is really hard to do because most people they can't wrap their head around it. It's like they want to bank the time, but then if you bank too much time, you can crash and burn at that 35K mark when it starts to get hard. So like, is there anybody for who banking time works? Or if you're going to bank some time, like how much is okay and how much is not okay? Like Alan and I just have this arbitrary number of if we wanted a 3 hour marathon, we should not go under 1:29:30. So like 30 seconds under the target for the first half. But I don't even remember where we got that number. It was just like
Yeah, our
a
rule was if
number.
you get to halfway and you're under 129, you're
You're in
programming
trouble.
yourself to fail because we have no
Yeah.
margin. We have no margin for error.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, in terms of banking time, like I would just suggest to people like take a look at what the best runners in the world are doing. Like when Sawai ran under 2 hours in the marathon, it was a negative split. And in the book, there's an example of American runner Emily Sisson at the Chicago Marathon when she set the American record. Same thing, just like even splits through, I think like 35K or 30K, and then closing faster. So slight negative splits are the optimal way to run the marathon. And I think I understand psychologically people where like if they're trying to run under 3 hours, if they see, 131 at halfway, I understand that for some people psychologically that's just like too much. And I'll try to talk them back to like, 129, 40 something, 50 something. But I would honestly like I think probably like, you know, 90-30 and then 89-30 or something like that is probably the optimal first second half split for sub three, maybe even 91 and 91 flat, 81 flat. And like I said, really, this kind of maps onto how I like to break up the race too, is like first 6, 8K, you just gradually work down to the target pace that you're looking for. Then for a big chunk of 20, 25K, even up to 30K in the middle, you're maintaining that same pace. And then in the last 10K or so of the marathon, you push the pace faster and then you almost always end up able to um, make up for and then some that progressive start. There are some people in some situations where I think an even paced start makes sense. It seems, at least at like big American and European races, it seems to be maybe like under 240 for men and under maybe 255 for women, roughly. And that's just more of like when you're in, and maybe this, you can apply this for slower times if you're in a smaller race, because basically, like, where that's coming from is if you're a man trying to run 240, for example, often it'll get pretty sparse after the first couple kilometers. Like there just aren't that many people, unless you're at like Valencia or something. Uh, it gets sparse enough that like it can help to just be with the people who are trying to run the speed you're trying to run,
Mhm.
versus like catching them at 25K or 30K, which is what you would do normally. So there are some situations. Another one that people will commonly encounter at all goal marathon times is pace groups, where like if
Yeah.
your 3 hour pace group is like, don't worry guys, I'm gonna negative split this, and you come through in like 91 minutes, people can be mad, right? That they want to hit that. So if you're in a pace group, almost always they will be trying to run
Even.
Even.
evenly. But if I had it my way, I could, and people didn't have any mental hangups about it, I would get them to do a slightly progressive start. So say you're trying to run 4 minutes per K in the marathon. I would say let's open up 412, 415, and then just lop 3 to 5 seconds per K off for the first, however long until you get to down to 4K, 4 minutes per K. Because the thing is, oftentimes you have a little bit of an uncertainty level around, okay, can I run 358 per K for the marathon, or 4 hours, or four flat, or 402? Like, what's exactly the right? So that starting and then working down allows you to on race day really suss out, like, okay, when am I at that intensity that feels like it's just the right, like, okay, this feels good, and then I'm just gonna like maintain that going forwards. And it buys you a little bit of insurance, because if you're like, I'm gonna run, you know, my uncertainty range is like, let's say 410 to 415 per K. I'm pretty sure I can run something in there. But if you're like, I'm just going to start running 410 from the start, no matter
Hmm.
what. If that was too fast, well, now you've like
Yeah,
you said, you've sort of
you're gonna blow
you
up.
spent on the credit card, and the interest is going to come due
Hmm.
at the end. Whereas if you'd started at 425 or 430 and worked down, and you get to 415, and you're like, oh, actually, I think this is about right for today, and you maintain that, and then close out a little faster in the last 6 or 8K, then maybe you end up averaging 413 or 412 or 413 or 414 for the whole marathon. So it's just that's structurally, that just seems to be a much better way to go about doing it.
I think I also read or heard or learned somewhere that because when you go into the marathon, like except if you're me for my first marathon when I had no coach, you don't warm up like for a 5K where you're like warming up for 45 minutes. So you're not really warmed up yet. And if you're going for those aggressive times, like, they're quite a bit faster than what your easy run pace is. So for like in my example, I guess 3 hours, but it could be slower than that. It's just, let's say it's, I don't know, a minute per K faster than your easy run pace or more, then I think like it's gonna feel hard after just maybe 10 minutes of jogging to go and start running that pace right away. And so in terms of effort level, like then you're you're at too high of an effort right at the beginning. So by sort of progressively speeding up, it's like you're getting what you haven't done in the warm up. You're kind of getting it there instead.
Yeah, and that's particularly an issue for lower mileage runners because I really want them to not do a big warm up for the marathon. Because like let's say you top out at 80 kilometers a week. Well, like 42K in a day is already a really big ask. So I don't want you
Hmm.
doing like, okay, I'm going to do like 5K progressive and then some strides and then some drills and then like 3 minutes at threshold effort and then I'm going to run the marathon. There's just so much volume before you even run the race.
Yeah.
So, yeah, the other benefit of that progressive start is you kind of sneak some of your warm up into the race itself.
Hmm.
And that's all. Also, really, another thing that affects everybody is a lot of really big races. Like if you go to run New York City, for example, New York City Marathon,
Hmm.
you're going to be just standing around in that corral for like 45 minutes or an hour before
Oh, that's
you're
true.
completely cold.
Hmm.
Some other races, like you could just, do your warm up and just like pop into the corral 5 minutes before the race starts, no problem. But a lot of big races now, you are basically starting cold. And so,
Hmm.
again, like, yeah, maybe if you're fully warmed up, ready to rock and roll, you can run 410 per K. But if you've been standing, standing in the dark on the other side of that bridge, just like waiting for them to start that race for an hour, and then you try to start running 410 per K from the gun, again, that's going to be pretty hard, and you're probably going to incur some extra cost on your body trying to do that.
I'm conscious of time, but I've got so many things I want to ask that I haven't got to yet. Um, maybe I'll ask you a little bit about resilience. We talked earlier we've talked extensively about VO2 max and steady state max or threshold. And the other significant things that you touch on with respect to marathon running is developing or understanding your running economy, which if I translate that, that's basically uh, how much forward motion can you get out of, 1 molecule of oxygen or 1 molecule of ATP, if you're going to get right down to it. Um, but you also touch upon a thing called resilience, which is not simply, I was thinking, oh, it's the same as running economy, but it's not at all. So, what is resilience for a marathon runner, and why do we need it, and how do we get lots of it?
Yeah,
Or more of it.
resilience. Yeah, resilience is your ability to resist deterioration in your effective fitness level, which is basically like the product of those other three things. So you might say like for like 10K or half marathon, roughly speaking, your sort of physiological fitness level is VO2 max times running economy times steady state max. That actually you can actually work out the math, and it gives you like a speed. That estimated speed is like an estimate of the speed that you can run at a steady state, the fastest steady state speed you can maintain. The
Mhm.
marathon, though, the situation is as you are going throughout the race, those three components are deteriorating. They're getting worse because of the stress of the race. Like there's a lot of like biochemical stuff going
Yeah.
on
Your
with
liver
like
glycogen is emptying out,
you're
and
losing fuel,
yeah,
and then you're incurring muscle damage as well. So your muscle
okay.
fibers, you can think of the like, and it turns out that the big contributor to resilience is mostly loss of running economy. It's mostly a deterioration in your efficiency. So your let's say your VO2 max is 50 and you can maintain a VO2 of 40. So you're consuming 40 milliliters of oxygen per kilogram of body weight per minute. It's like a, it's a macroscopic amount of oxygen. That's kind of your fuel, so to speak. Technically, it's your oxidizer, but we'll call it your fuel for the sake of this argument. Your efficiency is how, like you said, how fast can you go on that 40 milliliters of oxygen in a minute? Um, the problem is that conversion rate of like aerobic power to forward motion is getting worse as it's like if your car is like breaking down and
Like
your gas
your
mileage is getting
engine's
worse and worse and worse.
deteriorating. Yeah.
Exactly. Your tires are getting going flat. So what's happening is your muscles are number one, running out of fuel. Number two, incurring a lot of damage. Number three, um, sort of stewing in this biochemical milieu. This is what's happening, by the way, Liz, when you're doing those like 10, 12K tempos and you're like, this felt so easy at 6K. Why I'm running the same
Mm.
speed? What's happening at 10 or 11K? Like, why is it so much
Doesn't
harder?
feel the same at all.
You're just stewing in these like byproducts of aerobic metabolism. It's not nearly as bad as like if you're running 5K pace and trying to hang on. But there's other stuff. There's ammonia and all this, calcium ions and stuff getting churned out. And so all that is contributing to the same amount of energy is converting into less muscular force. Or equivalently, you have to spend more energy, burn more calories just to maintain the same speed. So what happens is like, let's say before the race or at the beginning of the race, you could maintain a steady state at 4 minutes per K. Um, but when you get to 15K into the race, now that steady state, that max steady state, it's only 410. And then at 30K into the race, now it's 420. And if you were trying to run 415 and now you're at 30K and your effective highest steady state is 420, but you're trying to run 415, now you're essentially like racing 8K pace or 5K pace or whatever with 10K to go in the marathon or 12K to go in the marathon or whatever it is. So now you're in trouble, right? So now this is what happens to people when like they have that dramatic blow up late in the race. Is like they've gone way beyond their effective steady state capabilities. They're completely out of fuel. Their muscles are just wrecked from damage. And okay, so that's resilience. And then the second part of your question, how do you make that not happen? The key here is long, fast workouts at speeds close to marathon pace. Like that's basically the whole motivation for the marathon specific phase is how do we take that marathon pace and become able to go further at the same speed?
Dan,
Quite a
I was
lot of the
hoping
focus.
you would say, "Oh, just watch this video on YouTube and resilience will."
That'd be a lot
There's
easier
never
than
an easy
doing
fix, is there?
long.
No. You do have to put in
Hard
the work.
work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people I do want to emphasize it does need to be at speeds that are close to marathon pace because a lot of people I was talking at the beginning about kind of the classic, I do my 20-mile easy run and my threshold workout and then I run the
So they
race.
do a lot of work and they do work hard. They're just not working at the right
They're not working
hard.
specifically, I would say. So
Yeah.
like that 20 miles easy is not the same type of fatigue. It's not the same demands on your body. Even like physiologically, there are physiological differences in what's going on inside your body when you're running easy versus when you're running within 5 or 10% of marathon pace. So you need to spend a lot of time in that marathon specific domain, that marathon specific zone, if you want to use that term, to build up that ability. And you want to expose yourself to it gradually over time. Like I was saying, you're probably not going to go and you shouldn't do 32K at 95% of marathon pace tomorrow. That workout is great for
That's a
building
relief.
resilience, but you
Mm.
build up to it gradually over time and you gradually extend your ability to last and maintain your effective fitness for a lot longer. And if you look at what you mentioned that lecture I gave, kind of the motivating example is like, okay, you look at the top marathoners in the world, their physiology actually, they have a high VO2 max and they have good running economy. a pretty good steady state max, but it's not off the charts. What's off the charts is their ability to maintain a very high percentage of their VO2 max and
Hmm.
maintain a very high percentage of their steady state max for a really long time. And that's what's really moving the needle for them.
Yeah, you actually shed light on that missing piece because I mean, I think we've known because you read it in books that in a lot of books they will have that the elites can maintain like a marathon paces like this close to their whatever VO2 max or whatever. Um, and it's always much more than everybody else or a significant amount more. So they're just able to like it's like they can work harder for longer, but it's not really that. I guess it's this resilience piece. So it's something that can be
Yeah.
trained. It's not like oh they can do it just because they're somehow gifted or special. I mean they are, but then everybody can train that and everybody can be closer to their what they're capable of doing than they are now, for example.
Yeah, I think some people have this idea that like elite athletes are just like mentally tougher and they just like they hit the wall at 32K and somehow they just like tough it out.
Magically, yeah.
And it's like no, like they're like obviously they're very mentally tough, but like they have built physical capabilities. Yes, some of it's genetic and some of it's early childhood environment and all that. But they have training methods that you can adapt. Now you don't do the elite
You
version
can
of the
do
workout.
your
You do it.
version of
Yeah,
it.
you do
Yeah.
your version of it, right? You're not going
Hmm.
to do 40 kilometers at 95% of marathon pace. That's what Sebastian Sawe's out there doing. But you can do a similar you can apply the same principle to your own training and build that same ability so that instead of hitting 30K or 32K and just completely blowing up, now you can actually finish faster at the end of the race instead of, having to take walk breaks.
All
And
right.
and we can get those out of your book.
Hmm.
Um, if you
And
had a
there's a lot
copy,
of other things that you can get out of this book because I mean, there are way more questions we could have asked, and we didn't even ask, we didn't even prepare questions for all of the topics that you covered. I mean, the book is just a wealth of information. So, where do you want to direct people to get a copy if they want to read it for themselves?
Best place is marathonexcellence.com. For your listeners, I should point out there is a special metric edition, which there's a banner for it on the homepage, or you can go to marathonexcellence.com/metric. That has everything in kilometers. There's also, of course, a version in miles that has minutes per mile and all that. But yeah, marathonexcellence.com is a place to get it. Paperback and also ebook, both available.
Fantastic.
yeah, a large percentage of our listeners are actually in the US and the UK, so they'll probably be happy to have a miles version also.
Yeah,
But
just
I
as
really
Canadians.
appreciated the kilometers version.
Yeah,
Yes, yeah,
definitely
yeah.
because a lot of the plans that we followed in the past I've had to convert. Otherwise, I sometimes what I did in the past was I set my watch to be in miles. So then I
Mm.
didn't have to think about it. But anyway, yeah, so thank you for thinking of us. It's really really amazing.
And yourself, John, if people want to go and see your lecture on YouTube or want to follow you or what you're up to or you specifically, do you have
Yeah,
social
best.
media?
Yes, best place to follow me is actually my email list. So runningwritings.com/news. I'm also on Instagram at Running Writings and YouTube at Running Writings as well. But if you want to find out whenever I have a new blog post, a new training calculator app, new podcast like this, the email newsletter, that's the place to be. Runningwritings.com/news. That's where all my early access and fun stuff. That's the place to be.
We'll put that in
Okay.
the notes for people as well.
Hmm.
Fantastic stuff. I mean, we could have gone on for another hour or so, um, but probably we shouldn't. And we should just cut to our summary reviews.
All right, ladies first, I guess. So this book is basically a gold mine for marathoners. So at this point, I think if you only wanted one book, although maybe if you've been listening to us for a while, you already have a whole bunch of books. But if you wanted one book about marathon running to last you for mini marathons, this would definitely be the one. And even if you have a collection of marathon running plans that you've tried, I would say that some of the supporting information, even if let's say you don't want to follow the plan right away, the other information that you'll get from the book is just definitely worth it. Um, there's a really good layout for the information. So the chapters are really short. I think Alan mentioned that at the beginning. And also they're separated into sections. So you can decide to read like a section that, let's say, you're particularly interested about. We didn't really go through it, but I mean, I guess if you want to follow the training plans, I would suggest reading the book from the beginning. Otherwise, you could probably kind of dip in to the later chapters sort of here and there later on as you need. But what I found was that the for the training plans, you actually need to have read what the workouts are, which is in a different chapter, and how to like modify things is also kind of useful, and add kilometers and all those things, because the plans have a range, and the range is pretty big, so you want to kind of know where to put those extra Ks. That was pretty much it. I think I had a disclaimer at the end, but the disclaimer is just if you've hopped into the training plan section thinking I'll read the rest later, don't just go and Google Kenyan style progression run. Like all the details are in section 2 of the book. You should just go read that first, because first of all, when you're following a plan, you need to also follow the philosophy of the person that wrote the plan. Otherwise, you're doing it wrong. And then if it doesn't work, it's not the coach's responsibility. It's yours. So that's the disclaimer.
You have been warned.
You've been warned. Yeah, I know because I hear people doing this all the time, especially now with AI. It's like
Hmm.
people will chat GPT everything, and it's like, sometimes you shouldn't. Then this is one of those times.
Take time to understand a little bit about what you're getting into.
Hmm.
For my part, basically Marathon Excellence for Everyone, a very comprehensive book about marathon training and running, um, and one that works at many different levels. I think if you want to understand what you are training your body to do and why, and then you want to build your own plan, all the background is there. You can basically, John talks you through how to build your own plan and structure it. Basically, what his mental process is at each step of the way, so you can see how it's built. If you don't want to geek out on all that stuff, which I particularly did, but good to no, just give me the plan. Well, just read the first couple of chapters so you know what the runs are, the many various different types of runs. And then you can grab a plan and go. And there's a big choice. We didn't go into that, but there are 7 types of plans, and then different distances, and then different weeks. Also, if I think Liz touched on it, that basically it's a book that you can, as you evolve your marathon journey, the book will take you on that evolution over a period of time. So if you start, modest and then get more and more ambitious, I think the book will feed your ambition with plenty of stuff to keep you moving forward. It's got lots of stuff to keep you interested and is backed up by a good deal of physiology science to explain what's happening to your body. I kind of, as somebody with a pharmacy background, I kind of get off on all of that stuff: pharmacology, biochemistry, physiology, um, all of that sort of stuff. There are also plenty of tables at the back so you can work out your pace. So if you go, well, oh, I know what my 5K pace is now, but I don't know what 90% of my 5K pace is. Well, there's a table that gives you all the percentages, and it spoon feeds you quite nicely. Um, as we said, also we used the kilometer version, which we appreciated, but there's a mile version too. So make sure you get the one that suits your particular style. Uh, Something we didn't mention, there's also a series of QR codes in the book. Um, where you can actually just, you go, well, I'd like to get a kind of hard copy of a plan so I can scribble on it or modify it or talk through or stick it on my fridge, Liz.
I like that. I
Yeah.
like sticking things on my
You
fridge.
can just you can scan the QR code, download a copy, or download a conversion paste table, or download a conversion table, or download the temperature variation paces, or download the humidity variation paces. So there's all sorts of super resources there. So it's a very chock full book. I would say it's probably 2 to 3 times the normal book that we would read. In terms of how long it's taken us to digest it all, and even then we're going to have to go back and probably go through it over many training sessions. So thank you for the book, and a great job. Well done.
Thanks for writing that.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you for the kind reviews.
Okay.
So Liz is just going to do the outro because she tries to get somebody from Spotify to give her a 1-star review usually. But just before she does the outro, would just like to give you one final thanks, John, for spending all the time you have done with us today, and for writing the book, and for doing all the resources online. I would advise anybody to have a little browse at Running Writings, and they'll find something interesting there for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. It was great to be on.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Running Book Reviews. Big thanks to Dr. Davis for sending us copies of the book, Doctor because PhD. Once again, I'm the Wallowitz of the group, but it happens every so often. And also, thank you for spending time with us today. If you'd like to leave us feedback about how we can improve the podcast, or want to suggest a book that you'd like for us to review in a future episode, you can leave us a comment on social media. We are Running Book Reviews on Facebook and Instagram, and on Twitter, we are reviews_running. Please also follow us on social media to find out about new episodes when they're released, or you can subscribe to the podcast on your favorite streaming platform. If you've been listening to us for a while and are wondering how you can help us out, there are a few ways. First of all, if you're enjoying the podcast, spread the word, tell your friends about us, or share a link to your favorite episode, maybe this episode. You can also leave us a review on Apple Podcasts if that's how you listen to the podcast, or you can rate us on Spotify out of 5 stars. The podcast is also now uploaded to YouTube, so if you like to listen to podcasts on YouTube, there is no visual, but it's just the audio, but you can leave a comment on the episode. And we are on a platform called Buy Me a Coffee, where you can buy us a coffee, but that is completely unnecessary. You can just go on there and read things that we've put up there in the past. Alan's done a race report. We've put a few extra
Liz's wedding
things.
Photographs are there.
Oh yeah, that's pretty old.
Still,
yeah, okay, that's.
Yeah, there's all sorts of outtakes and little snippets.
It's because I got married in running shoes. It's the only reason why it's there. It is related, guys. Don't worry. But yes, go see us on Buy Me a Coffee.
That's all for Running Book Reviews for now. Bye.
Bye.
Did you notice Cheyenne, when he did the buy on the last edition, he did it exactly like you. He said he's programmed
that's so cute.
by listening to your podcast.
That also means that he's probably like part of the 1% that listens to the outro. I mean, who listens to the outro anyway? I figure half the people have
Everybody.
tuned out by now.
Okay, and we're out.